Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be looking at BT-06, and BT-06 adds a lot of extra power into the game, and we could use that extra power in some new and exciting ways, and one of those ways is going to be with the new Three Musketeers deck. So the Three Musketeers deck is basically just a band of megas that are all being very powerful at controlling the field, utilizing their options in some very devastating ways. So, without further ado, going over the deck. Starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DemiMeramon. So, DemiMeramon is still one of the best, if not the best, Digitama that we have to be working with for purple, just because it has this nice inheritable ability of On Delete, allowing us to draw 1 card and discard 1 card from our hand. So this is really good because not only is it getting us through our deck faster, but it's also filling up our trash at the same time, allowing us to selectively choose what's going to be going into our trash to line up our synergies better. So all of that combined is just making DemiMeramon really good. But as far as the 5th Digitama of the deck goes, it could kind of be anything you feel like you want to be using. I think that the Pagumon from the starter deck is looking to be pretty good because it has another On Delete ability where we get to trash the top 2 cards of our deck. So even though I'm not really the biggest fan of self-milling, we do need to try to fill up our trash a little bit so that we could use certain synergies and certain cards. So Pagumon is looking to be just another really good card at trying to help fill up our trash. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Soundbirdmon. So Soundbirdmon is kind of a bit of an underrated card just because it's not really a good card in most decks. So what's making it a really good card in this deck is it has a nice when attacking ability where we get to trash 1 option card from our hand to gain 1 memory. It doesn't specify anything else outside of just discarding an option card, and we do want our option cards to be in our trash, so that way we could use them off of our other cards later. So Soundbirdmon being able to just fill up our trash and gain us a memory is looking to be pretty good, on top of which, because his stats are a little bit on the low side, he is going to be one of the best, if not the best, targets to Digivolve our Digitamas on top of, ensuring that we're going to get their On Delete abilities. So all of that combined is just what's making Soundbirdmon a really good card for this deck. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Labramon. So Labramon is just another really decent card for this deck because she has this nice on-play ability where we get to draw 1 card and then discard 1 card from our hand. So again, all of the same reasons why DemiMeramon is really good is why Labramon is really good on this on-play effect, and because we are going to be playing this deck a little bit differently, we don't necessarily feel super bad if we don't always get to use this ability, but it's a really good ability to use when it goes off. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Iman. So this is probably the most important rookie in the entire deck because it's a very powerful card for its on-play ability. So what its on-play ability is doing is you get to trash 1 card from your hand, and then you get to return 1 Digimon with 7 Great Demon Lords or 3 Musketeers in its type from your trash to your hand. So this is basically just trading whatever you don't want from your hand with a card that you do want. Most of the time it is going to be a 3 Musketeer because you're just going to be using this to grab back your megas, so you could reuse your megas in some very powerful ways. So that is just what's making this card really good, just allowing you to recycle your megas. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Deputymon. Yes, this is a black Digimon in a primarily purple deck, but we don't care about the fact that he's black because he has an on-play ability that's incentivizing us to actually play him rather than Digivolve into him. So what his on-play ability is doing is we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our deck, and then we get to add 1 Digimon with 3 Musketeers in its type, and or 1 option card with a memory cost of 7 from among them into our hand, and then trash the rest. So this is just another really good consistency tool, just to ensuring that we have the availability to try to see the cards that we want to see, so that way we can line up our power plays and our synergies. And then on top of it, his on-play ability, he has a nice other ability where during your turn, this Digimon can Digivolve into a Digimon with 3 Musketeers in its type from our hand for the low memory cost of 6, and we get to ignore its evolution requirements. So this is really powerful because essentially we get to go from a level 4 to a level 6, so it's acting as a good warp, allowing us to use our level 6s in some various different ways, and making sure that we always have the available option to try to play them the best that we possibly can, because we are going to be playing this deck a little bit differently than most other Digimon decks, so we're not really going to be playing a whole lot of level 5s to just naturally Digivolve up, on top of the fact that the 3 Musketeers are in 3 different colors, so having Deputymon to be able to play all of them is looking to be really, really good. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Viomon. So Viomon is another flex spot of the deck. It could really be anything you feel like you want it to be. I just find it really important to run some blockers in the deck on the early stages just to try to stave off some of the opponent's early aggression, and Viomon is one of the better blockers that we have access to for that. So the big reason why I really like running Vilemon over something like Devimon is just because he has a lower play cost and higher DP, making him that much harder to deal with for the opponent in case we don't see any of our rookies. Then playing him for 5 versus 6 is really good, and 6,000 DP versus 5,000 DP is just larger because he could block a lot of more potential Digimon, on top of the fact that there is a lot of removal for 5,000 and below, so it makes Vilemon less susceptible to be hit by those types of removals versus Devimon, even though Devimon, yes, he does Evo for 1, making him more tempo efficient if we're going to be Evoing, but we're not really trying to Evo that often, and more often than not, we're going to be hard playing our cards. So Vilemon is just looking to be a really good card, but like I said again, this is just a flex spot, and it could really be anything you feel like you want it to be. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Kinkakumon Promote. So Kinkakumon Promote is a rather unique Digimon just because he's a level 4 that could Digivolve from a level 3 or a level 4, so he has some extra utility and usability there. And on top of which, the primary reason why we're going to be running him is because he has the rush ability. So even though he does hard play for 6, we're almost never going to hard play him for 6 just to get the rush ability off, because we have some ways of bringing him back from our trash to trigger this ability. And then we don't even care about his on-play ability at all, because we're not running any of the other cards that are supposed to be synergizing with it. We just care about the fact that he is a level 4 that has 6,000 DP and the rush ability. But if you don't feel like running Kinkakumon Promote, then he is also another flex spot of the deck to run whatever you feel like you want to run. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Vilemon as the only ultimate of the deck. Now, you don't even have to run any ultimates if you don't feel like it, so he is another flex spot of the deck if you just want to try to run some various other things. So what this card is doing and why I like it is because he has the unique ability to Digivolve off of black or purple. So this actually means we could use our Deputymon to Digivolve into Vilemon if we so need to act as a little bit of a safety net in case we don't see any of our megas. And then on top of that, he has a nice when Digivolving ability where we get to trash 1 card from our hand to have this Digimon gain the blocker and retaliation abilities until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is really good just because it could stop a lot of the opponent's aggression, just because blocker paired up with retaliation means that we could stop and delete almost any Digimon that's trying to aggress onto us, and that's looking to be really, really powerful. On top of which, he also has another ability where during all turns, this Digimon is also treated as black, so he is also considered a black Digimon if we need to Digivolve him into some of our other megas, which we are also running some black megas because 3 Musketeers runs in 3 different colors, and we're primarily going to be utilizing purple and black, which Vilemon just fits nicely in. But speaking of our megas, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gudraman. So Gudraman is a black 3 Musketeer, level 6, so that's a card that we could use for Vilemon, or we could warp Deputymon into Gudraman if we so feel like it. And what's making Gudraman really good is the fact that he is also a blocker, so we do have a level 6 blocker to utilize, and then on top of that, he has a very powerful when Digivolving ability where we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck. Then we get to use 1 option card with a memory cost of 7 among them for free, and then we get to trash the rest. Or if we don't see any options, then we also have the possibility of deleting one of the opponent's Digimon in play with a play cost of 4 or less. So if we do see an option, then we get to use it. If we don't see an option, then we get to possibly delete a low-level Digimon, which is looking to be pretty good because it gives Gudraman a lot more viability because it has a lot less of an opportunity for his ability to whiff. So that's just making Gudraman really good, on top of him being a 3 Musketeers for just 3 Musketeer synergy and a high-level blocker for the deck to try to stave off some of the opponent's aggression. But as far as the main mega of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Starmon. So Starmon is looking to be very, very powerful because of everything this card is doing. So first off, the big thing that we have to note is she does have a on-play ability, but she does have a play cost of 12. But on top of that, she also has a way of reducing her play cost, and the way she's reducing her play cost is for each Digimon with 3 Musketeers and each option card with a memory cost of 7 in our trash, then we get to reduce her play cost by 1. So the more cards are in our trash, the cheaper she'll become, and the easier she'll be to hard play to get her on-play ability off. And we really want her on-play ability to go off just because it's really, really powerful, where we get to add 1 option card that costs 7 from our trash back into our hand, and then we get to use 1 option that costs 7 from our hand for free. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same option you're grabbing back, but the fact that she could basically allow us to toolbox our options is making her really, really powerful, on top of her reducing her own play cost, allowing us to literally just raw play a mega for relatively cheap, is just why Starmon is looking to be very, very powerful. On top of the fact that she is a 3 Musketeer and does have all of that 3 Musketeer synergy. And then the last level 6 of the deck and the last of the 3 Musketeers, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Magna Kidman. So Magna Kidman isn't necessarily the best card in the world to be using, but he's still a pretty decent card just because we do have Deputymon to warp into Magna Kidman. At worst, we could use Magna Kidman as discard fodder if we feel like we can't use him at all. So he does have some pretty decent utility in the deck, on top of which he does have security attack +1, so he is actually acting as some of the decks like major punch potential, where he could help try to close out games because of that security attack +1, dealing multiple damage, on top of the fact that he also has a really nice when digivolving ability of his own, where we could use an option card with a memory cost of 7 from our hand for free, and then if we didn't use an option card from his effect, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So he's kind of acting similar to Gudraman, where we want to try to use the option, obviously because all of our options are really good, but at worst, if we don't use an option, then he does have a plan B to try to delete a low-level Digimon, and that's looking to be pretty good. So even though he's not the best of the 3 Musketeers, he's still a pretty decent card to be running nonetheless. And then as far as the level 7s go, it could really be anything you want, but I'm choosing to run 2 copies of Omnimon Swartz, just because Omnimon Swartz is just still a really good card to be using. So what's making this card so good is the fact that he could evo off of black or purple. So we have Starmon and Gudraman to evo off of him, and then on top of that, he also has a really powerful when digivolving ability, where we get to trash the top 3 cards of our deck. Then we get to play up to 2 black or purple Digimon from our trash that have a play cost of 8 or less for free. So this is really good because it's spawning some really powerful board presence, on top of which we do have a decent amount of on-play abilities that we could trigger off of Omnimon Swartz ability. So we could use something like Deputymon, we could use something like Kinkakumon Promote, assuming the memory doesn't pass over onto the opponent's turn. We could even use Vilemon and Labramon, so there's just a whole bunch of cards that Omnimon Swartz synergizes with off of his when digivolving ability. And then on top of that, he even has another really powerful when attacking ability, where we get to return 1 level 6 Digimon from his inheritable source to our hand to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with a play cost of 12 or less. So Omnimon Swartz just has a lot of power and potential and synergy with what the deck is trying to do. And then as far as the other level 7 of the deck, I'm just choosing to run 2 copies of Omnimon Swartz Defeat because Omnimon Swartz Defeat is still an insane card to be playing. He has a cheap evo cost and can evo also on top of purple or black, so the only Digimon he can't really digivolve on top of is going to be Magna Kidman, which is the only reason why I'm running 1 of Magna Kidman, because he doesn't have synergy with our level 7s, although he could depending on your build. But regardless, the fact that Omnimon Swartz Defeat also has a security ability of being able to play himself for free, ignoring the security battle, is really good just because a free level 7 is a free level 7. And then on top of that, if we choose to digivolve into him, then we get his when digivolving ability to delete one of the opponent's tamers. So he's one of the few cards in the game that is interacting with the opponent's tamers. And then on top of that, he also has an on delete ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon, doubling down and acting as some good control when the opponent is going to have to deal with him. So Omnimon Swartz defeat is just also a really powerful level 7 in his own right, and why we definitely want to run him. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Goldschwarmer. So Goldschwarmer is going to be one of the best options that we have to be running in the deck just because of how powerful this card is. So what this card is doing is, the first big thing is it's a 3 Musketeers option card, so we could use this option card disregarding its color requirements as long as we have a 3 Musketeers on our field. So that's really, really powerful because it just allows us to use the option card whenever we feel like we want to, basically. And this is a really powerful option card because its main ability allows us to delete all Digimon with a play cost of 7 or less. And this does include your own Digimon, so keep that in mind when using this ability, but most of the time you're not really going to care because you're going to have a Mega level Digimon on the field, or you just need to board wipe just to board wipe and get everything off the field. So this is looking to be very powerful for that alone, on top of the fact that it also has a pretty good security ability of adding itself to our hand, so that way we could use it whenever we feel like we need to, and we could even hold it in our hand to play for free off of our 3 Musketeers, because all of our 3 Musketeers allow us to play options that have a play cost of 7 for free. So this card is just absolutely fantastic for what the deck is trying to do, and for those who don't know, and I kind of didn't mention it before, this is a control type deck where you're just trying to control the field as best as you possibly can while chipping away at the opponent's security, so keeping their field as clean as possible is making Goldschwarmer a really good card to use. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Trump Sword. So Trump Sword is still a really good card for this deck just because it is a purple option card that costs 7, so just that alone means it's going to have some synergy with what the deck is doing, and then on top of that it has the very powerful main ability of deleting one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon. Yes, the Digimon does have to be unsuspended, so they can try to play around the card, but not all the time could they play around this card, and we don't even have to cast this card all of the time and rely super heavily on it anymore, just because we do have multiple different options that we could think about using. So the fact that we don't have to use this is really good, and the fact that we do have it for when we need it is also what makes it really good. On top of the fact that it does have a very powerful security ability of activating its main, is just adding to the overall playability of the card, so its security ability, even though it also can whiff, is still looking to be pretty powerful just because of everything this card is doing. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Fly Bullet. So Fly Bullet is another 3 Musketeers based option card, so it just already has some good synergy with the deck, and it's acting as, yet again, another really powerful removal option card to be playing. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability to delete one of the opponent's Digimon that's level 6 or less. So this is really, really powerful because it's almost the equivalent of Gaia Force for purple, even more so than Trump Sword, even though Trump Sword has its own strengths and weaknesses, so does Fly Bullet. So between the two, we have a wide variety of being able to delete almost any Digimon on the opponent's field, and on top of that, it also has the nice security ability of activating its main, so it's just a really powerful card to be playing around with overall. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Nailbone. So Nailbone is another 7-costed purple option card that just synergizes very nicely with the deck. So what this card is doing is that you can use its main ability to be able to play a level 3 purple Digimon and a level 4 purple Digimon from your trash for free. The only unfortunate thing is we don't get their on-play effects, but this is still really powerful because the whole big line of combo play that we're trying to do is we're trying to use Starmon to use Nailbone for free to res something like Kinkakumon Promote to then gain the rush ability and try to push the aggression that way. So that's the whole big intended purpose of the card, on top of which we still do have other very powerful Digimon we could consider resing with it. So we do have Viomon, and we do have something like Soundbirdmon, or even at worst if we need to res the other 2. It doesn't necessarily matter the fact that we don't gain their on-play effect, they're just bodies on board to put pressure onto the opponent. And then this has the nice security ability of being able to play a level 4 or lower Digimon from our trash for free without its on-play ability triggering, so at best we're going to be using this to res Vilemon or a blocker to just try to stave off some of the opponent's aggression. So there's just a lot of things that we could do with Nailbone based on its synergy and possible lines of play off of the different cards we want to be interacting with it. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Happy Bullet Showering. So Happy Bullet Showering is another and the last 3 Musketeers option card. It has the nice main ability of deleting all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP. So if they do share DP, then they all get deleted. Otherwise, it'll probably just end up deleting one of the opponent's Digimon. And this is really strong because if they only have one Digimon, then it just straight up deletes it. But if they do have multiple Digimon out, then it's just going to delete the weakest one. So it does have its own strengths and weaknesses on how it can be utilized, but the fact that it's still a very powerful removal option that we could play for free off of our 3 Musketeers is the primary reason why we want to be playing it. And on top of all of that, it has the nice security ability of activating its main, making Happy Bullet Showering a very powerful card to be using still. And then the last card of the deck is going to be the only tamer of the deck, and this is another flex spot of the deck. You don't even have to run any tamers if you don't feel like you want to, but I just feel like for what the deck is trying to do, Matt Ishida is still a very fantastic tamer just because he's a memory fixing tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he's just always going to hard set it to 3, which could be really good depending on some of the other stuff that we're going to be playing with. And then on top of that, the primary reason why we want to use this card actually is for his on-play ability, just because it allows us to return a purple Digimon or purple option card from our trash back to our hand. So this is really good because the primary card we want to grab back is going to be Starmon, just because we could then reuse her in some very powerful ways. And then on top of that, at worst, we could use it to grab back some of our other cards, just to try to help keep us in the game as efficiently as we possibly can. So Matt, even though he's an optional card and you don't even have to run it, he's still just a really good card to be running in the deck. And then there's just a whole bunch of other cards that you could consider running in the deck, all depending on the types of synergy and support you want to be playing around with. So if you want an alternate Digitama, I think the other best Digitama is going to be Tsunomon, just because he's going to be helping you draw cards every time you discard, so you could lean a little bit heavier into the draw and discard aspect of what purple can be doing, and we do have other cards to help facilitate that draw and discard synergy in the form of Ogremon, just because Ogremon has this nice on-play ability to trash one card from your hand to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon to try to make sure that they don't have any Digimon in play. And then on top of that, we also have Sora and Mimi as another card to just act as a good way to just draw and discard cards, on top of the fact that it's actually a really good tamer for the deck, because the only condition or requirement to gain the 2 memory at the start of your turn is the opponent having no level 4 or lower Digimon in play, and that's going to be very easy to do considering we do have lots of ways of deleting a whole bunch of different Digimon at different stages. So the biggest card to combo with Sora and Mimi is going to be Goldschwarmer, ensuring that they're not going to have anything on the field, so that way we could get Sora and Mimi's ability off more consistently. Then we do just have a couple of other small engines or packages you could run in the deck. So if you want, you could run the Iman from BT-02, just because Iman helps us fill up our trash with his on-delete ability, and he also could help trigger our on-delete abilities off of our other Digitamas as well. And we even do have Vilemon to interact with the fact that we have 2 different Itmons to be playing off of. So if you wanted to, you could even run Vilemon, and if you really wanted to, you could even run Lilithmon as another support card, just because the new Itmon does interact with 7 Great Demon Lords, and Lilithmon is a 7 Great Demon Lord interacting with options. Then we do have just some other really good cards that we could consider playing, like Tapermon for his on-delete ability to draw a card, Gazimon to try to shut off the opponent's memory manipulating shenanigans, Mechanorimon just because we could hard play him and he's just one of the best blockers that we could hard play in the game. We have Devimon just to act as a good way of trying to delete the opponent's Digimon with his retaliation ability, also trying to trigger our on-delete abilities if we want to run more of those. Then we also have the blocker Devimon, as I mentioned before, as just a really decent alternate blocker you could consider running in the deck. Then you also have Millenniumon as an alternate level 7, just because Millenniumon plays off of black and purple and has some very powerful abilities of his own, one of them being a removal ability, one of them being a recursion ability, so he's just a very hard Digimon to be dealing with at times. And then you even have access to Omnimon Alter S. So Omnimon Alter S is just another really powerful card to be running. And by extension, if you are going to be running a whole bunch of different Omnimons, then you could run Matt and Tai as another duo tamer to think about, just because it interacts with our Omnimons, making them have a little bit more punch than they do normally. Then we also have Grave Memory Boost as another memory boost card that we could consider thinking about. You could play Purple Memory Boost, but with all of the different colors, I just think Grave Memory Boost is a little bit better, just because the main target we want to bring back with Grave Memory Boost is going to be Starmon, and then we even get its delay ability to try to gain it to memory at a later time, so it's looking to be a pretty good card there. And then the last big card to mention is going to be Mimi, all the way back from BT-03, just because Mimi is a purple tamer that is interacting with options. So there's just a ton of different things that you could do with the deck, all depending on the cards that you want to run and the types of support you want to provide it with. So this deck is one of the hardest decks that I had to build, just because nothing was super concrete and everything was kind of just loose and everything synergized super nicely with each other, and it really is just personal taste and opinion on how you want your ratios and your deck to function and operate. But at the end of the day, you do just need to understand that this is a control style deck, and you do need to run enough options in order to trigger your abilities and get them to be as valuable as you possibly can. So it's just a really interesting style of deck, just because it is playing a little bit differently than most of the other decks in Digimon. The closest thing that you could compare this to is probably a security control type deck, just because you're going to be hard playing things more often than you're going to be drawing, but it still has ways of drawing cards and racking up some value. So it's looking to be a pretty powerful deck to be running, and it's probably one of the strongest decks to be coming out of the BT-06 meta. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.